Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week. And if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be showing you how to make a modern t-shirt. Clean and classic was the vibe for this short sleeve affair, so we kept the design restrained, adding only the smallest of details, capped with a closed neck collar that's the perfect balance of fancy and subtle. Speaking of, if you're looking for fancy projects or something subtle to crochet, you're in the right place. We've got hundreds of modern crochet designs with more coming, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a thumbs up if you like it or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on with the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 250 grams of yarn, or that's 600 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us your favorite way of artistic expression. For me, outside of crochet, I love to draw. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is for size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're going to grab our 5mm hook, and we're all going to start by making a chain that reaches from about an inch underneath our underarm to about an inch underneath our bust. So the measurement that I need is just about 5 inches or 13 centimeters, so I will start by making a chain of 20. And now that we have our chain, we're going to be doing a slip stitch row. So how we're going to do that is start by blocking off that last chain, and we're going to do a chain 1. Now that chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's just our turning chain. And from here, we're going to be inserting our hook into that second chain from our hook, or that chain that we blocked off. So go ahead and insert your hook into that chain. And then once we have those 2 loops on our hook, we're just going to yarn over and pull through both of those loops. Now there is our first slip stitch. Let's do another one. Start by finding that next available chain. Insert your hook into there, and when we have those 2 loops on our hook, just yarn over and pull through both of those loops. And a really quick tip that I have for you guys, when we're doing our slip stitches, make sure that we're not tugging too tightly after we finish every stitch, because otherwise the following rows can be a little too tight to work into. So let's do this again. Next, we are going to gently insert our hook into that following chain, yarn over and pull through everything, and continue to put 1 slip stitch into every chain until we have just 1 left so that we can increase together. Now that we have just slip stitched into every chain, we should have left the last one. Into that last one, we're going to be doing an increase of 2, so just 2 slip stitches into that last chain. So into there, insert with your first slip stitch, and then into that same last chain with another slip stitch. Now the second one could be a little tricky to work into. Once when you pull it through, it might not want to pull through as smoothly, or it could just get lost within the next row. So just make sure that you're keeping track of every row count that you have. And now that we have our increase all finished up, we're going to get started on our following row, which is going to be another slip stitch row. But we're only going to be increasing into every other row. So from here, all we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and then make your way down, putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch now, because we want a really pretty ribbing. So let's all start by finding that next available stitch and insert your hook in through that following back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through everything. Let's do that again. Into that following stitch's back loop, yarn over, pull through everything, into that following stitch's back loop, yarn over and pull through everything, remembering that we're not going to tug too tightly after we finish every stitch. Continue to do this until we reach the end of the row. And now that we've made our way all the way down with our second row with our back loop slip stitches, we're going to work our way up to the following row. And all that's going to be is just chain one, flip our work, and then continue to put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving the last one just so we can increase together once more. Alright, so now that we have just put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving that last one, we're just going to do another increase with you guys. So at the end of every odd number row, we're going to insert our hook into that last back loop with one slip stitch, and then into that same back loop, a second slip stitch. Now from here, we're just going to continue to repeat our two previous rows. So for every even number row, one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and then into every odd number row, a back loop slip stitch row that ends with an increase of 2. And we're just going to keep repeating these 2 rows until this can stretch from mid underarm over to the corner of our underarm. We do want to double check and make sure that we are stretching this as if we're wearing it when we're putting it up to ourselves, because this does have a lot of stretch to it. So I'll meet you guys back once when we finish an odd number row, so after we end our increase along the top, so that we can just make a chain that works all the way up to the shoulder from there. Alright, so I am back with my underarm portion, and I have a total of 9 rows. Now this is just about 1.5 inches or 4 centimeters unstretched, because remember it can stretch quite a bit. And now from here, since we all should have ended along the top, we're now going to make a chain that reaches all the way up to our shoulder. Now I've already measured mine out. I need roughly 6 inches or 15 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain of 22. And now that I have my chain, we're going to do our slip stitches all the way back. So right after our last chain that we did, we're going to block it off and do a chain 1. Now that chain 1 still doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, you're going to insert with a slip stitch, remembering not to tug too tightly after every stitch. And continue to put one slip stitch into every chain, and I will meet you guys back once we're ready to get started working into the body portion right over here. Alright, so now that we have slip stitched all the way down our chain, we're now right where our underarm starts. So I just wanted to meet you guys back to remind you that we were going to be doing back loop slip stitches. And also tell you that this first slip stitch that we have may be a little tricky, because as you guys can see, this is mine right here, but it is kind of tiny. You want to make sure that you're not accidentally skipping over that stitch, just to make sure that we're keeping up with all the stitches that we did, working our way all the way up to our shoulder. So just insert your hook into that first stitch's back loop, yarn over, pull through everything, remembering not to tug too tightly, and continue to put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now the shoulder portion is not going to have any increases or decreases. So at the end of this row, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and then just put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, making our way all the way up. And from there, we're just going to continue to repeat that row until this portion that we have can stretch over until we're about 2 inches away from the base of our neck. And then I will meet you guys back along the bottom so that we can get started on our neckline right after that. Alright, so I am back and my shoulder portion is now all finished. I have a total of 16 rows now, and now my width is just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters, still unstretched. And what we're going to do from here is start working on the neckline. So first things first, we're going to need to insert our stitch marker into any stitch along the top, making sure that it's in multiples of 3, the width that we want our collar to be. Now when we work into our collar later, I would like for my collar to be about 2 inches. So I measured from the top 2 inches, and I've inserted my stitch marker into the 9th stitch. And what we're going to do from here, since we all should have ended along the bottom, is do our back loop slip stitch row, making our way all the way up until we are 2 stitches right before a stitch marker. Alright, so finishing up our first neckline row, we have done our back loop slip stitch all the way down until we are 2 stitches right before our stitch marker stitch. And now we're just going to do a decrease of 2 slip stitches into there. So we're all going to start by inserting our hook into that second to last stitch's back loop, yarn over, and pull through, and then also insert your hook into that last stitch's back loop. Now once we have those 3 loops on our hook, just yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops, and that is our decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. Now we are going to be decreasing into every row, so right after our decrease, we're going to chain 1 and flip our work. And since we're along the top, we are going to start with a decrease again. From here, we're going to insert our hook into the last stitch from our previous rows, back loop, pull through, into that following stitch's back loop, yarn over, and pull through everything on our hook. And that's it. That is how we decrease. From here, continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and then we're just going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until this portion can stretch to mid-chest. So just to remind you guys, at the end of this row, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, while doing a decrease of 2 into the last 2 stitches, and then to work our way up to the following row, chain up 1, flip our work, start with a decrease of 2, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, making our way all the way down. Now, a really quick tip that I have, for just this decrease portion that we have right here, the amount of rows that we have just starting from this first decrease row over to the middle of our chest, the amount of rows needs to be in multiples of 3. So I've already done the math for mine, and just for the first side, I'm going to have a total of 9 rows for this decreased neckline portion, and I will meet you guys back along the top, just so we can do the middle row and then we can do the other side together. Alright, so I am back and I'm all finished up with the decreased side of my neckline. I now have a total of 25 rows and my width is now just about 4 inches or 10 centimeters, and that is unstretched. And I know that 4 inches sounds super tiny, but just remember it does stretch. But once when we are here, we should have all ended along the top, and we're going to do 1 middle row. That's going to work our way all the way down, just putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So from here, all we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and then make our way down, putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of this row, chain 1, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving that last stitch so that we can increase together. Now right before we move on, I just wanted to let you guys know to insert your stitch marker into the top of this row, just so we know where our middle row is. And now that we have that, I will meet you guys back so that we can increase. Alright, so we have just made our way all the way down with our middle row, and then made our way all the way back up with our back loop slip stitches, leaving the last stitch so that now we can increase together. So into that last stitch's back loop, we're going to insert in through there, yarn over, pull through everything, and from here we're just going to repeat everything that we did here for the same amount of rows, but instead of decreases, we're going to do increases. So into that same last back loop, 1 more back loop slip stitch, and that is our increase. And now from there, since we decreased into every row for this side, we're going to need to increase into every row for this side. So chain 1, flip our work, and then into that last back loop from our previous row, we're going to do another increase. So just like I said in one of our previous clips, our increase stitches can easily be forgotten or tucked underneath, so just make sure that you're keeping track of each of your rows. But there's my first stitch, and then into that same back loop, we're going to insert with another back loop slip stitch. And then from here, continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and then that is it. We're just going to continue to repeat these 2 rows, making sure that we do an increase into every, for the same amount of rows that we have for the first half of our neckline, making sure that we are not counting that middle row. So go ahead and get this side of our neckline all finished up, and then I will meet you guys back. Alright, so I am back with the second half of my neckline. Now I have a total of 35 rows. My width is just about 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters, still unstretched. And now that we have this, we can get started on the shoulder. So since we all should have ended along the top, we're going to start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches that we skipped along this end. So if you guys have my numbers, I skipped a total of 9 stitches. So right here, I'm going to make a chain of 9. And this shoulder portion is going to be pretty simple. Right after we have our chain, we're going to do our back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases for the same amount of shoulder rows that we have along this side. So just to remind you guys, right after we make our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with our first slip stitch, and then we're going to be putting 1 slip stitch into every chain. Once we reach this body portion, make sure that we're inserting our hook into that small back loop slip stitch that we did for our increase, and then just put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And I will meet you guys back when we have the same amount of shoulder rows as this side right over here, and then we can get started on the underarm portion. Alright, I am back and my shoulder portion is all finished up. And I now have a total of about 6.5 inches or 17 centimeters still unstretched. And now we're just going to finish up our front panel by doing our underarm. So the first thing we're going to have to do is insert our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made when we worked our way all the way up to our shoulder. So if you guys have my numbers, I made a chain of 22. So from here, counting from the top, I inserted my stitch marker into the 22nd stitch. Now, since we all should have ended along the bottom, we're going to be putting one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and we're going to leave 2 stitches right before our stitch marker so that we can decrease together. Alright, so now that we put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch until we have 2 stitches right before our stitch marker, we're going to do our decrease together. So we're all going to start by inserting our hook into that second to last stitch's back loop, yarn over, pull through, and then also into that last stitch's back loop. Once we have those 3 loops, yarn over, pull through all 3. And from here we're going to repeat the same types of increases that we did, but with decreases, as our first underarm portion. So since we only increased into every other row, we're going to decrease into every other row over here. So for our following row, since we're working our way down towards the bottom, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and then I will meet you back when we have just 2 stitches left, just so we can decrease together once more. So now that we've made our way all the way back up, we left the last 2 stitches, so let's just decrease together once more. So start by inserting your hook into that following stitches, back loop, yarn over, pull through, and then into that last stitches back loop, yarn over, and pull through all 3. And then that's it. From there, we're just going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows for the same amount of rows as our underarm portion right over here. Do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you guys back. Alright, so I am back and I have just finished up my underarm. Now the entirety of my front panel is all finished. My width is a total of about 8 inches or 20 centimeters, and that's still unstretched. And now we're going to do our back panel, but it's going to be done pretty much the same way as the front panel. So I actually have mine done. So I'm just going to talk you guys through it. So getting started with our back panel, we are all going to make the same underarm that we did for the front panel. So start by making the same amount of chains, and then we're going to do our back loop slip stitches, increasing into every other row for the same amount of rows that we have for the front panel. Right after that, we're going to do a chain that reaches all the way up to our shoulder, the same one as the front, and then we're just going to do back loop slip stitch rows for the same amount of rows that we have for the front panel when it comes to our first shoulder row, working all the way across to our last shoulder row right over here. Now the only quick tip that I have for that is that once we reach the middle row that we have from the front panel, we're going to be inserting our stitch marker into that middle stitch into the back panel as well. We just want to make sure that we know where that middle row is. But once we have that, we're going to close off our back panel by doing the same underarm as the front panel, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you guys back. And once we have both our front and our back panel all finished up, the next thing we're going to do is seam it all together. So first things first, we're going to be placing our front panel on top of our back panel, and then we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back. And from here, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and then do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now all we're going to do is single crochet, making sure we're working in through both the front and the back panel at the same time, putting 1 single crochet into every side row. So just to do the first one, we're going to find our first side slip stitch row right here, which for the front panel, this is mine, which is this raised row. So I'm going to find that top loop and insert my hook into there. Now within the back panel, I'm going to find my first side row, find that top loop, and then insert my hook into there as well. And once we are in both through the front and the back panel, we're going to single crochet. Let's do this again. We're next going to find our next side row, which is this divot for me right over here. I'm going to find this top row, find that top loop, insert my hook into there within the front panel, find the next side row within the back panel, which is this divot right over here. So find that top loop, and then single crochet them together. Now let's do this just once more. Find that next side row within the front panel. Mine is this raised row, so I'm going to insert my hook into that top loop. We're going to find the next side row within the back panel. Mine is this raised row right over here. So I'm going to insert my hook into that top loop and then single crochet, and then that's it. We're going to continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. And when we don't, we're all going to do a chain up of 1 and cut. And then do the same thing we just did here on the other side. Alright, and now that our shoulders are all seamed up, the next thing we're going to seam is our sides. So first things first, when it comes to the shoulder, we're just going to make sure that our work is now flipped right side out, meaning the seam that we have for the shoulder is along the inside. And then from here, we're going to be inserting our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Go ahead and insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, and then do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam, so let's get this started. So first thing we're going to do is find that first available stitch into the front panel, and we're going to insert our hook only in through that front loop or the loop that's nearest to us. Next, we're going to find that next available stitch into the back panel, and then we're going to insert our hook only in through that back loop. And once we have those 3 loops on our hook, just yarn over and pull through all 3 loops, just like that. Let's do this again. We're going to find that next available stitch into the front panel and insert your hook. Find that next available stitch into the back panel and insert your hook into there. And once we have that, yarn over, pull through everything. And that's it. We're going to continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left. And when we don't, go ahead and do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you guys back. Alright, so I am back and I have just finished up seaming everything together, and I did try out one of our sleeves. We're actually going to get started with our bottom portion first. So what we're going to do is make sure that our work is flipped right side out. Next, we're going to be inserting our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of the back panel, because that's where the seam is going to be. I'm going to insert my yarn onto my hook, pull through, and then we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side row that we have, making our way all the way around. So since we should already know how to do this because we did have to work into every side row for our shoulder seam, we're just going to do the first few together. So since we pulled our yarn through, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to start by finding our first side row. Now my first side row is this raised row right over here. If yours is a divot, that's completely fine. All we're going to do is find that top loop, insert our hook, and then single crochet. There's our first stitch. Let's do another one. This is my next side row. I'm going to find that top loop, insert with 1 single crochet, and then that's it. Let's just do one more set together. This is my next side row that I have right here, which is a raised row. Just insert your hook into that top loop with a single crochet, and then we're going to find our following side row. Mine is this divot. I'm going to insert my hook into there with a single crochet. And I'm just going to continue to do that, make my way all the way around, slip stitch into that chain space, and then I will meet you back. Alright, so our single crochet row along the bottom is all finished up. Right after we did our slip stitch, we're all going to need to make a chain the length that we want the rest of this top to be. So from here, working my way down, I want the rest of it to be about 9 inches or 23 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain of 40. Alright, so now that we have our chain, we are going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a half double crochet. So how that's going to work is yarn over, and then into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, and pull through. And once we have those 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, and pull through all 3. There's our first half double crochet. Let's just do one more. Starting with the yarn over, insert your hook into that following chain, pull through all 3, and that's it. We're going to continue to do this all the way down our chain. So I am back, and I've just finished up putting 1 half double crochet into every chain. From here, we're going to need to slip stitch it into the base, but before we do that, we need to make sure that our work is flipped right side out and that we are working clockwise, because the ribbing that we're going to have for the bottom is not going to be reversible. But once when we have double checked our work, we're now going to find that second available stitch into the base. So all together, we're going to find that first stitch and then count out that second stitch. Into that second stitch, making sure we're working clockwise, I'm going to insert my hook into there, and then I'm going to do a slip stitch, sew yarn over, pull through everything to close off this row. Now from here, our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row, and we do need to work our way up to the following row as well. So just into that next available stitch into the base, I'm going to insert my hook into there with a slip stitch, and then flip my work. And now from here, we're going to be putting one back loop slip stitch into every stitch until we reach the end of the row. So now that we've made our way all the way down with our second row, which was a back loop slip stitch row, we're going to need to work our way up to the following row, which is going to be another half double crochet row, but from here on out, they're going to be within the back loops. So all we're going to do to start off every half double crochet row is chain 2 and flip our work. And just to do the first one, we're going to yarn over. We're going to find the last stitch from our previous row and then insert our hook into that back loop, and then half double crochet per usual. Let's do that again. Yarn over into that next stitch's back loop and half double crochet. And we're going to continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. And now that we've worked our way all the way back up to our base, I'm just going to connect it into the base with you guys once more. So now that we're right here, we don't have any more stitches left to work into. We're going to count out the next 2 available stitches into the base. So here's 1 and here's 2. Into that second stitch, we're going to slip stitch into there to close off this half double crochet row. And then just to work our way up to the following row, which is a back loop slip stitch row, we're only going to be slip stitching up that following stitch. From there, we're going to flip our work and then make our way down, putting one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And then that's it. Just continue to repeat these 2 rows, making our way all the way around with no increases and no decreases. And then I will meet you back so that we can seam everything together. Alright, so now that we have made our way all the way around with our back loop half double and back loop slip stitch rows, we're now going to seam it all up. So first things first, this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, the same seam that we did for the sides, so we want to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, meaning we see all the ribbing for the bottom portion. And then we're going to be inserting our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, and then we're just going to do our outside loop slip stitch seam together for the first stitch. So once when our hook is in through both, we're just going to yarn over, pull through everything, and then from here we're going to find that first available stitch into the front panel, and then we're going to insert our hook into that front loop or the loop that's nearest to us, and then into the back panel we're going to find that back loop or the loop that's farthest away from us. And once we have those 3 loops, all we're going to do is just yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops, and then that's it. Continue to do this, making our way all the way down. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, go ahead and do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so now that we have just finished up seaming the bottom, we're ready to get started on our bottom band. So what we're going to do first is a single crochet row. So make sure that our work is flipped right side out. We're going to insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom. Go ahead and insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, and then do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now all we're going to do from here is 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row, and then when it comes to doing our half double crochet rows, we're going to alternate between 1 and 2 single crochets. Okay, so let's just do the first one. Now my first side row is this side half double crochet right over here, so all I'm going to do is find that top loop and insert with a single crochet. Now my next side row is this side slip stitch row. Find that top loop and then insert into there with 1 single crochet as well. And then since into my last side half double crochet row I did 1 single crochet, into this next one that I have I'm going to be doing 2 single crochets. So go ahead and insert your hook into that top loop with 1 and then with another. And from there, we're just going to continue to do this, making our way all the way around. So let's do the next set together. So my next row is this side slip stitch row. Put 1 single crochet into that top loop. My next side row is a side half double crochet row. My previous side half double crochet, we worked 2 single crochets into there, so we're just going to be doing 1 into that one. Now our next side row is a side slip stitch. Always just put 1 single crochet into the top of that row. And then into my following side half double crochet, we're going to insert into the top of there with 2. So there's 1 and there's 2. And continue to do this, making our way all the way around, and I will meet you guys back right after we slip stitch into that chain space. Alright, so we have just made our way all the way around with our single crochet row, and now we're going to make a chain the length that we want our bottom band to be. Now I'd like for mine to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 3. And now that we have our chain, we're just going to block off that last chain, do a chain 1, that chain doesn't count as a stitch, that's just our turning chain, and from here we're going to slip stitch into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, and continue to slip stitch until we reach the base. Now that we've worked all the way down into the base, we're now going to need to slip stitch it. So find that next available stitch into the base, insert your hook into there to close off this first row. Now our following rows are going to be back loop slip stitch rows, so just find that next available stitch into the base, slip stitch into there, and then flip our work. And now that our work is flipped, we're just going to be putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of this row, chain 1, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, making sure that we're connecting it into the base the same way that we just did. And from here, we're just going to continue to repeat those 2 rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into the base. And then I will meet you guys back so that we can seam everything together. Alright, so we have just made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into the base, so now we're just going to seam it together with an outside loop slip stitch seam. So first things first, make sure that our work is flipped right side out, and then we're going to be inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Now from there, all we're going to do is yarn over, pull through everything, and just to do the first one together, we're all going to start by inserting our hook into that first available stitch into the front panels, front loop, and then into that next available stitch's back loop within the back panel. Yarn over and pull through everything, and that's it. Continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Do a chain up a 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back. Alright, so now that the bottom is all seamed up, we're ready to get started on our sleeves. So first things first, when it comes to our sleeve, make sure that our work is flipped right side out. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into the last stitch that we have into our side seam. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. And for this first row and our following row, we're going to make sure that we're working clockwise or to the left. So what we're going to do from here is start by putting 1 single crochet into every side row, and then 1 single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way up and around. So let's just do the first few together. So this is my first side seam that I have right here. It is this little divot. I'm going to insert my hook into that top loop. And as you guys can see, I have a decent amount of tail ends. So if you guys would like to weave in your tail ends as you go ahead and just grab all those tail ends and just place it over that stitch that we insert our hook into. And then we're just going to single crochet with our tail ends in the middle. So just yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. That's our single crochet. Then also, as you guys can see, all of our tail ends are in the middle. So let's do this again. This is my next side row that I have right here, which is this raised row. I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook into there, and if you're weaving in your tail ends at the same time, just place it over that stitch and single crochet. And then that's it. We're just going to continue to put 1 single crochet into every side row, making our way all the way up and over, slip stitch into that chain space, and then I will meet you guys back. Alright, so we just made our way all the way around with our first single crochet row, and now we're going to get started on our next row, and our row 2 is going to be a half double crochet row. And I'm only using air quotes because it's going to start off with some single crochets first. So right after we did our slip stitch, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to continue to work clockwise or to the left, and we're going to start by putting 1 single crochet into every stitch for the same amount of single crochets that we worked into for our underarm portion. So it should be the same amount of rows as underarm rows that we had. So for me, I had 9. So I will be doing my 9 single crochets. So to start by inserting your hook into that first stitch with a single and continue on until you have the same amount of stitches as underarm rows. Alright, so now that I have my 9 single crochets, right after that we're going to be doing a decrease of 2 single crochets. So into that following stitch we're going to insert, pull through, insert into that following stitch, pull through, and then once we have those 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, and pull through all 3. And then from here we're going to be putting 1 half double crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way up and over, but making sure we are leaving the same amount of stitches as underarm rows that we have, plus an additional 2, because we're going to have to do a decrease as well. So since I had a total of 9 stitches that I did my single crochets into, I'm going to leave 9 plus 2, so I will meet you guys back when I have a total of 11 stitches left. Alright, so we have made our way all the way up and around with our half double crochets. And like I said, I have left my 11 stitches. So from here, we're going to start with a decrease of 2 single crochets. So inserting your hook into that following stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through all 3, and then from here put 1 single crochet into every stitch. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, slip stitch into that chain space, and then I will meet you back. Alright, so our row 2 is all finished up. I have slip stitched into that chain space, and now our following row is going to be a slip stitch row. Now our slip stitch rows aren't going to have any increases or decrease into them. So right after that, we're going to chain 1, flip our work now because we want the ribbing to be along the outside. So now we're going to be working counterclockwise, and then we're going to insert our hook into that first available stitches, back loop, yarn over, and pull through everything, just like how we did the bottom. And continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, slip stitch into that chain space, and then I will meet you back so we can get started on the next row. Alright, so our back loop slip stitch row is all finished up, and from here it's going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows, but our half double crochet row is going to be within the back loops, so I'm just going to remind you guys how to do that once more. So right after we did our slip stitch into that chain space, we are going to chain 1 and then flip our work. So after we've flipped our work, we're going to start by putting 1 back loop single crochet into every stitch for the same amount of underarm rows that we had. So for me, that was a total of 9, so I'm going to have 9 back loop single crochets. So now that I have my single crochets into the following 2 stitches, we're going to do a decrease of 2 single crochets within the back loops as well. So into that following stitches back loop, insert your hook, pull through into that next stitches back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3, and then from here on out, we're going to be putting 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, making sure that we're leaving the same amount of stitches as underarm rows that we have, plus an additional 2 to do the decrease. So once we've half double crocheted all the way down to that point, we're going to do a decrease of 2 single crochets, and then close off this row with 1 back loop single crochet into the rest of the stitches that we have. Slip stitch into that chain space, chain 1, flip our work, and then the following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases. And from there, all we're going to do is just continue to repeat those 2 previous rows until this arm portion that we have gets nice and snug on our arm. Once we have that, I'll meet you guys back right after a back loop slip stitch row so we can get started on the length of our arm. Alright, so I am back and I have just finished up the cap portion of my sleeve and it's now nice and snug. Now the next thing we're going to do is just even out our sleeve a little bit so that it can lay completely horizontally on our arm. So what we're going to do is continue on with our half double crochet rows, but now with no decreases, and then our back loop slip stitch row as well. So since we all should have ended right after a back loop slip stitch row, I'm just going to get started on the following row with you guys. Let you guys do the rest on your own. So getting started on our first half double crochet row where we're going to start evening out our sleeve, we're going to start by putting 1 back loop single crochet into every stitch, still for the same amount of underarms that we have. So for me, that's going to be 9 back loop single crochets. And now that I have my 9 single crochets, we're just going to go straight into doing our back loop half double crochets. So same as all of our other half double crochet rows, but without the decrease. So all we're going to do is yarn over into that back loop, a half double crochet, and that's it. Continue to put one back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and then once we have the same amount of stitches left as our underarm rows, which it's 9 for me, just put one back loop single crochet into every stitch, slip stitch into that chain space, and then do your back loop slip stitch row. And this portion isn't going to have any increases or decreases. So just continue this until it becomes horizontal on your arm once when we wear it, and I'll meet you back right after a back loop slip stitch row. Alright, so I'm back and I have just finished up the few rows that I needed to even out my sleeve when we're wearing it. I now have a total of 23 rows. And now from here, we're just going to work on the length. So we can make the sleeve as long or as short as we'd like. And all we're going to have to do is alternate between a back loop half double crochet row and back loop slip stitch row. So that's going to be pretty simple. Right after our last back loop slip stitch row, we're going to chain 2, flip our work, and then just put one back loop half double crochet into every stitch. So just do the first one. We're going to yarn over, insert your hook into that first stitch's back loop with a half double crochet, and that is just about all we need to do. Continue to do this, making our way all the way around. Falling row is a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases. And just continue to repeat those 2 rows until we have a sleeve length that we like. Alright, so I am back and my sleeve is all finished up. I have a total of 32 rows and now ready to get started on our cuff. Alright, so first thing we're going to do for our cuff is make a chain the length that we want our cuff to be. Now I'd like for my cuff to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 3. Now that we have our chain, we are going to block off that last chain, do a chain 1, and then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch, and continue to put one slip stitch into every chain. And now that we've put one slip stitch into every chain, we now need to slip stitch it into the base. So start by finding that next available stitch, insert your hook into there with a slip stitch, and now this first row is all closed off. Now to work our way up to the following row, we're going to slip stitch up that next stitch, flip our work, and then make our way all the way down, putting one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and then that is it. We're just going to continue to do this, connecting it into the base the same way that we just did with our back loop slip stitch rows. And then I'll meet you back so that we can seam everything together. Alright, so now that we have made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch row for our sleeve, we're ready to seam it up. Since we already know how to do this seam, our outside loop slip stitch seam, we're just going to do the first one together. We're going to start by inserting our hook into both the corner of the front and the back panel, yarn over, pull through everything, and just to do the first one, we're going to find that first available stitch into the front panel and insert our hook in through that front loop, and then find that next stitch into the back panel and insert your hook in through that back loop. And when we have those 3 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through everything. And once we have that, just repeat everything we did here on the other side, and then I will meet you guys back. So getting started on our collar, we're all going to start by making sure that we're looking at the back of our piece and everything is flipped right side out. Next, we're going to be inserting our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the neckline. It doesn't matter which one. And all we're going to do is put one single crochet into every side row. And then once we reach the shoulder portion right over here, one single crochet into every stitch. Once we make our way all the way around, slip stitch into that chain space, do a chain of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you guys back. But the only tip that I have for you guys is once when we insert our hook into that middle stitch within the front and the back panel, we want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into that same stitch so we know right where the middle is so we don't have to go back and count and guess later. But go ahead and get that single crochet row done, and I'll meet you guys back. Alright, so we are back and we have just finished up doing our single crochet row along the entirety of our neckline. And now we're going to get started on the left side of our collar first. So we do want to double check and make sure that we have the same amount of stitches on both sides of our stitch markers. And then we're all going to start by inserting our hook into the right side of our middle stitch marker within the front panel, counting from the stitch marker stitch the width that we want our collar to be. Now I would like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters. So including this middle stitch, I'm going to be counting out a total of 6 stitches. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to be inserting my hook only in through that front loop. Now that my hook is in through there, I'm going to insert my yarn onto my hook, pull through, and then I'm going to start by doing a chain 3. Now just for this first row, this chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and from here we're going to be putting 1 front loop double crochet into every stitch until we work into that stitch marker stitch. So let's just do the first one. So start with the yarn over, and we're all going to do our first double crochet into that following stitch that we have, working down towards our middle stitch. So making sure that we're inserting in through that front loop, we're going to yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. That is our first double crochet. Let's just do one more. We're going to yarn over, also inserting in through that front loop, pull through 2, and pull through 2. And continue to put 1 front loop double crochet into every stitch, and our last double crochet will be worked into that middle stitch marker stitch, making sure that we're not taking that out. We just want to work into that stitch. So now that we've put 1 front loop double crochet into every stitch, we're now going to need to connect it into the other side of our collar. So we're all going to start by counting up the next 2 available stitches. So how that's going to work is find that next stitch, so it should be the following stitch that we have right next to our stitch marker stitch. So here's 1, and here's 2. Into that second stitch, we're going to slip stitch in through that front loop only. So this is my front loop right here. I'm going to insert my hook, yarn over, and pull through everything. And now my double crochet row is nice and connected. Now our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row to get some really pretty ribbing, so let's get the following row started. Just like how we did the bottom, we're only going to be slip stitching up 1 stitch, but it's still going to be within the front loops. We're keeping the stitches along the back still available so that we can work on the crossover when we do the other side of our collar. But to get started on our back loop slip stitch row, we're going to find that next stitches, front loop, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, and then flip our work. And now that our work is flipped, we're going to be putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, remembering that that chain 3 still counts as our first stitch. Alright, and now that we have our back loop slip stitch row, we're just going to alternate between a back loop double crochet row and back loop slip stitch row. So I'm just going to do my following row with you guys. So to get started, we're going to chain 3. This now doesn't count as a stitch, that's just our turning chain, and flip our work. Now we're going to need to do back loop slip stitches, making our way back down towards the base. So starting with the yarn over, we're going to insert our hook into that stitch's back loop with our first double crochet, and then continue to put 1 into every stitch. And now that we made our way back down with our double crochets, we're just going to slip stitch it into the base once more together. So count up 1, count up 2, slip stitch into that second stitch's front loop to close off our double crochet row, and then just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch's front loop, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now from there, we're just going to continue to repeat those 2 rows, making our way all the way back until we reach the stitch marker stitch along the back. Alright, so I've made my way all the way up to my stitch marker stitch, and we should have done our last back loop slip stitch row right before the stitch marker stitch that we actually have within the back. And all we're going to do is a back loop single crochet row, work it into that stitch marker stitch, and then do a chain up of 1 and cut. So from here, all we're going to do is chain 1 and flip our work. We're all going to start by inserting our hook into that first stitch's back loop with a single crochet, and then just continue to do this until we reach the base, slip stitch into that stitch, and then do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so now that I have just finished up the left side of my collar, we now need to fill in the right side. So how this is going to work is we're all going to start by inserting our hook underneath the left side of our collar, and then we're going to find that second stitch and then double crochet down, and then from there we're going to repeat, making our way all the way up until we reach this next stitch marker. And this does need to be worked this way because the back loop double crochet and back loop slip stitch rows aren't reversible. So I'm just going to turn my work just a little bit, so lifting my right side up, and then I'm going to take my work and then flip my collar down just a little bit. So now that my collar is flipped down, what I'm going to do is count the stitches that we have along the right side, and then insert my hook into that second stitch away from our middle stitch marker stitch. So as you guys can see, this is my stitch marker stitch. I'm going to count towards the right, 1 and 2. That's going to be the height of the double crochets. So all I'm going to do is insert my hook into that second stitch, insert my yarn onto my hook, and then from here I'm going to double crochet, starting by inserting my first double crochet into that stitch marker stitch and working towards the left for the same amount of double crochets that we made when we started off the left side of our collar. So I'm going to pull my yarn through, I'm going to yarn over, and this might be a little bit hard to see, but I will be inserting into that available stitch that my stitch marker stitch is into. So I'm going to bring my hook down into that stitch with my first double crochet. And from there, since I made a total of 6 double crochets, I'm going to do a total of 6 double crochets over here. So just to show you the next one, this is my next available stitch. I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into there with my second, insert into that next stitch with my third, and continue with that until we have the same amount of stitches as the left collar. And now that we have the right collar's first double crochet row all finished up, we're just going to chain 1, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Alright, so I'm back and I've just finished up my back loop slip stitch row. This could be a little confusing, but we are still underneath our left collar right here, and we're going to need to connect it into the base. So what we're going to do is find that next available stitch that we have. So as you guys can see, this stitch that I have right here is the stitch that I worked into for the first double crochet row. So I'm just going to insert my hook into that following stitch, which is this one right here, yarn over, pull through everything, and now my back loop slip stitch row is nice and attached. And from here I'm just going to show you guys how we're going to be slip stitching up to our double crochet row now, so it's going to be a little different, and then it's going to be a repeat. So start by finding that next available stitch into the base, insert your hook into there, yarn over, pull through, and then we're going to need slip stitch into that following stitch into the base as well, because we need the height for the double crochets, and then we're going to flip our work. And now that our work is flipped, we're just going to put 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch, and then that is it. We're just going to continue to repeat these 2 rows, making our way all the way up to our stitch marker stitch, making sure that we are doing a back loop single crochet row into that stitch as well. But don't do a chain up of 1 and cut once we reach there. I'll meet you back so we can seam everything together. Alright, so I've made my way all the way up with my back loop double crochet and back loop slip stitch rows. I have worked into that stitch marker stitch along the back, and we're ready to seam everything up. Now this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam. Since we already know how to do that, we're just going to do the first one together. So start by making sure that our work is flipped right side out, and we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Now from there, we're going to pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and just to do the first one together, we're going to find that first available stitch into the front panel and insert only in through that front loop. And then we're going to find that next available stitch into the back panel and insert your hook in through that back loop. And once we have those 3 loops on our hook, just yarn over, pull through all 3, and continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, go ahead and do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so now that we have that all seamed up, we are all done. The last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye!